Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tekken Talk. I know it's been a while. For those of you who know or don't know, I stopped playing Tekken after the Battle Pass update because of principles reasons, but that's neither here nor there for today. But I have been loosely following the scene, and I do want to give a quick shout out to Chikarin for winning Evo Japan relatively easily. Of course, no tournament win is easy, but at least as a spectator, it appeared that, he just blew through everyone essentially. So today I wanted to return to the topic about Tekken and kind of the state of Bandai Namco introducing microtransactions into the game. And the reason why I'm going to talk about this is just because I still have hope that they will either backtrack or revert the decision for the Battle Pass at least, or the Tekken coin currency, or just one of these kind of practices that I personally strongly disagree with. I think they're relatively predatory, and FOMO, fear of missing out, is something I don't want in a game that I'm playing, but I think that, there's still hope. And as long as there's some pushback, there's a chance it will change in the future. So today I actually wanted to talk about a scenario that gave me some hope and kind of, I think, should be an example for what a community can do to mobilize and push back against greedy decisions from game corporations. Because, of course, as I think many people will agree, certain practices in gaming have been getting worse over time. Over time, of course, a lot of amazing games and the quality of games gets better over time, but the actual business practices that affect and potentially are to the detriment of many games have been getting worse. And I'm specifically talking about microtransactions and pay-to-win mechanics. But one example of corporate greed that I'm sure many of you have heard about in the gaming industry was the whole Helldivers 2 debacle, where Helldivers 2 is an insanely popular third-person shooter game. It is a live service game, but I haven't played it, but according to most people, it's like what a live service game should be, in that the content is all really good, it's all very reasonable. And this insanely popular IP was essentially um, almost destroyed overnight because of a Sony decision where Sony basically said, okay, PC Steam players, and destroyed overnight is maybe too far, but at least on PC they said, okay, to play Helldivers 2 no matter what, you need a PlayStation Network account. And this is not a new thing, and in fact, this is something that most people are not too unhappy about, because it's like, okay, it takes a minute or two to set up a PSN account. Of course, Sony is notoriously horrible at user data. I still remember the hacks throughout the 2010s where it's like Sony's 90% of their player base has their data leaked or something along those lines. So I understand the reluctance to it, but the real backlash, I think, came from the fact that there was all the evidence in the world that the game had the infrastructure not to have this. And when it has it after launch, it basically meant a bunch of people in countries where you can't easily make a PlayStation Network account without, I think, lying or using a VPN, could no longer play the game. Because if you need a PlayStation Network account to play the game, and then you can't make a PlayStation Network account, you can't play the game, even if you already bought it. And of course, there were some refunds, so good on them in that case. But it's really unclear why Sony would make this choice, other than the only explanation I can think of is some form of, oh, this gets more PlayStation Network users, which, we can say in our kind of annual report of how many users we've gained, which looks good for our company, or something like that. But given Helldivers 2's success, it was a relatively greedy kind of might as well decision that rightfully and immediately earned intense backlash from the community. Now, again, the developers of Helldivers 2 are not, as far as most people know, not directly at fault for this decision. It largely seems a decision from Sony's kind of corporate offices. And the game went from, I believe, like positive or mostly positive reviews. I think mostly, or maybe even very positive, to overwhelmingly negative recent reviews over the course of like 2 days because of this decision. And I think a bunch of their player base tanked on PC and everyone was pissed. And I've never seen that much of a flip. And in fact, the backlash was so extreme and the media coverage so negative that, believe it or not, in a rare occurrence, Sony reversed its decision. They had a tweet, which I will read to you now. Helldivers fans, we've heard your feedback on the Helldivers 2 account linking update. The May 6th update, which would have required Steam and PlayStation Network account linking for new players and for current players beginning May 30th, will not be moving forward. We're still learning what is best for PC players, and your feedback has been invaluable. Thanks again for your continued support of Helldivers 2, and we'll keep you updated on future plans. So let's bring this back to Tekken, shall we? Because after all, that is why we are here. So Tekken 8 is currently sitting at mostly negative recent reviews at 35% positive and 71% mostly positive overall. So on the verge of being mixed. And if you check their review graph, I think in a couple weeks, it will likely drop to mixed. So why? So there was clearly a pretty decent backlash, a pretty big backlash over the Battle Pass release. And it really was the Battle Pass release, right? The Tekken shop was scummy, and releasing it after the review date, I think many people agree should not be allowed by some way, shape, or form. But the Battle Pass really put people over the edge, like myself, because when the Tekken shop comes out, it's like, okay, I can vote with my wallet. I mean, I lost the opportunity to vote with my wallet by not buying the game, but I can vote with my wallet by not buying or not purchasing the costumes or the currency, and I can make a video or two or a podcast about it or two and push back in that way. But I'll still play the game. But naturally, if Bandai Namco escalates, then my pushback has to also escalate. And with the Battle Pass, it's like, well, my next option is to stop playing the game, because I already decided to vote with my wallet, but they raised the stakes. So in this case, I'm going to stop playing. But why did this kind of big backlash to the Battle Pass not push Bandai Namco to change? Well, I have kind of three main reasons for this, and I'm going to compare and contrast them with Helldivers 2. The first reason is, in some sense, the drip fed is a little bit too extreme, but right, Tekken released these microtransactions additions kind of step by step, right? So they first introduced the shop, and when they introduced the shop, they just introduced it in a PowerPoint presentation. And then they actually introduced the shop in the game. And then after they introduced the shop in the game, they introduced the Battle Pass at a PowerPoint presentation. And then after that, they actually introduced it in the game. And of course, there's also the balancing fiasco that went along with it. So having those releases not be all at once, I think is, again, probably intentional from Bandai Namco, at least the Battle Pass and shop being not released at once. But right, that means that people who are going to defend Bandai Namco no matter what, have like a slightly stronger case in the beginning than they would if this was all released at the same time. So the outrage was mitigated, and of course, if change occurs slowly, more people are more likely to accept it than if change occurs quickly. In general, I think that's true. So let's talk about the second main reason, which is essentially Helldivers 2 was introducing something that alienated a big part of the player base. Like, full stop. Whereas in Tekken 8, the people who are going to not play the game because of these microtransactions are the vast minority. And it is true that the argument of, well, you can always just play the game. You can still play the game. Nothing's stopping you from literally playing the game is true, right? I could still reinstall my Tekken 8 game. So I think that slightly mitigated the backlash a little bit. And then the third reason, and I think this is maybe the biggest reason why the backlash wasn't both as big as it should have been and why it didn't so far really affect Bandai Namco is there is no real competitor to Tekken 8. This is a huge problem. If there is a real competitor to Tekken 8, then when Bandai Namco makes a mistake or makes a bad choice like this and there's serious community backlash, then the player base will drop significantly more if there is an alternative game to go play. In Helldivers 2, when people are pissed and saying, okay, I'm going to not play your game because of Sony's decision, there's a bunch of other co-op third-person shooters that they can play. I'm not saying any of them are as good as Helldivers 2, but there's a legitimate, giant amount pool of third-person co-op shooters. Whereas if the category is 3D fighting game, 3D competitive fighting game, we can argue about whether arena shooters are like competitive in the same way fighting games are. But 3D fighting game, Tekken is the only one. Right, in 2D fighting games, you do have a plethora of options because 2D fighting games are a lot more popular amongst indie developers as well as AAA developers, right? So, right, just off the bat, for 2D fighting games, you have Dragon Ball FighterZ, Grand Blue Fantasy versus Mortal Kombat 1, Street Fighter 6, Guilty Gear Strive, Eunice, Melty Blood, Them Fighting Herd, Skullgirls, and these are all games with fairly popular player bases. Whereas Tekken 8, maybe you could say Soul Calibur 6, but one, Soul Calibur 6 is also produced by Bandai Namco, and two, the player base drop-off is just intense. And mechanically, they're so different, right? The Tekken 3D fighting game formula should have competitors, right? Virtua Fighter was a legitimate competitor. There should be another competitor because as long as there isn't, if you're a 3D fighting game fan, then you don't have an alternative, right? So I think these are the three things that kind of make it distinct from the Helldivers 2 situation, but I do think there's still hope. So at least on my end, I don't know if I can continue to push back that much because, it does unfortunately get to a point where the player base will be steady and the competitive scene will be steady so that, the voices talking about the microtransactions and stuff will be slowly kind of going away. But at least I have hope that the negative reviews keep coming. I know that sounds not great for people who are playing Tekken, but I think it's for the better. And hopefully they revert some of their decisions with the microtransactions because I want to play the game again. I want to be talking about the game every week. I want to be watching the game because I still think that the base formula for Tekken is genius. And I think it's produced an awesome game. So thanks for listening. And let me know your thoughts if you'd like, either in the comments of this podcast or on Twitter. Have a good one.